Hey guys, tonight we begin not in darkness, but in dust. The kind of ancient dust that doesn't rise when you breathe, because it's already inside you. You're standing in the lowlands of Mesopotamia, where modern Iraq stretches its flat spine beneath a pale moon. There's no music here, just the distant hum of wind skimming cracked earth. You can smell salt in the soil, left behind by rivers that forgot their names. This is where civilization is supposed to have started. That's what you were taught. Sumer. The birthplace of writing, law, architecture, bureaucracy, beer. The blueprint for everything we think makes us human. But as you crouch near the foundations of Uruk, brushing your hand along cuneiform baked into clay, something doesn't add up. The river patterns don't align with the settlement layers. The metallurgy appears too refined, too early. And beneath it all, there's a deeper stratum, older, undecorated, unacknowledged. Let's be honest, if this were real, you wouldn't make it past the third tunnel. Not without a PhD, a flashlight, and a very lenient concept of safe excavation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment below where and when you're watching. Maybe it's midnight in Michigan. Maybe it's a rainy afternoon in Manila. Either way, welcome. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your descent into the accepted cradle of civilization, and then take a hard left turn. According to mainstream historians, Sumer arose around 4000 BCE. The story goes, nomadic tribes began settling in fertile land between the Tigris and Euphrates, gradually inventing agriculture, cities, religion, and governance. By 3000 BCE, they had ziggurats, kings, and surprisingly effective postal systems. But that narrative depends on one thing: there's nothing before Sumer. Except, what if there was? Archaeological evidence has started to whisper, softly, inconveniently, that human complexity may not have begun here at all, that there might have been something earlier, much earlier, something not yet explainable. Take the curious case of the Ubaid culture, predating Sumer by over 1,000 years. The Ubaid people left behind sophisticated settlements, irrigation systems, and figurines. Odd ones, depicting humanoid figures with reptilian features and exaggerated skulls. Some say they were symbolic artifacts, metaphors. Others aren't so sure. Some even link them to ancient alien theories. But that's less the point than the fact we don't know. No satisfactory explanation has emerged. One paper reads, with scholarly exhaustion. Then there's Eridu, the so-called first city, born before urbanism was supposed to exist. Its earliest layers hint not at slow development, but sudden structure. As if someone already knew how to build a temple, a granary, a civic center. And yet, deeper still, geologists have noted strange anomalies beneath the city. Not natural faults, but possibly man-altered formations, cut into clay long before the Eridu temple was raised. Carbon dating dances just out of range. The soil confuses isotopic analysis. There's interdisciplinary confusion, the kind that makes universities quietly decline further grants. You walk across the dry plains and feel something unsettling. It's not fear. It's familiarity, like you've been told a story before. But this time, you're starting to remember the missing lines. The Sumerians themselves claimed they did not invent civilization. Their kingship, they wrote, was lowered from heaven. The gods gave them writing, law, language. They didn't create, they inherited. The Sumerians believed in something before Sumer. And now, as you kneel near a dig site at Lagash, the wind shifts. You hear whispers, though there's no one around. A scholar once joked, "Mesopotamian chronology is a game of polite lies." Dry sarcasm aside, it's more accurate than most textbooks. You leave Mesopotamia behind, not because it's empty, but because it's full of questions. And your next stop isn't far in linear miles, but in time, it might as well be another universe. Southeastern Turkey. The landscape rolls like a forgotten sea, chalky hills, scattered trees, rocks that don't quite belong to the terrain. You arrive just before dawn, when the sky hangs in that blue-gray suspension between past and present. Below you, half swallowed by earth, stands a site that should not exist. Göbekli Tepe. The name translates to Potbelly Hill, but that's misleading. This is no simple mound. This is a wound in the archaeological record, clean, deliberate, and unsettling. You descend into the enclosure, careful not to step on the exposed limestone. Each pillar rises with quiet defiance, some over 5 meters tall, carved with animals that seem pulled from fever dreams. Snakes, vultures, foxes, headless humanoids. They circle you in rings, facing inward, like an audience waiting for someone to speak. The structure predates writing, agriculture, even pottery. Carbon dated to at least 9,600 BCE, Göbekli Tepe is over 7,000 years older than Sumer, built when humans were supposed to be primitive hunter-gatherers. Pre-agrarian society was not supposed to have labor organization, symbolic artistry, or sacred architecture. And yet, here you are. The question isn't just who built this, it's why did they bury it? Because Göbekli Tepe wasn't destroyed, it was intentionally entombed. The builders covered their own creation in layers of sediment, sealing the enclosures with the care of a culture that didn't expect to be remembered. Mainstream archaeologists call it a ceremonial site, a vague label for something that rewrites the timeline of human complexity. The animal motifs suggest ritual. The scale suggests coordination. But there's no evidence of permanent residence nearby, no hearths, no burials, no trash. Civilization without cities, a structure without a people. Fringe researchers whisper that it's a relic of a lost global civilization. What some call the antediluvian world, others call Atlantis. The idea, of course, is dismissed by academia. Still, those carvings, one in particular, a strange totem featuring a vulture lifting a spear, a scorpion below, and a decapitated man. Astronomers have proposed that the configuration matches the night sky of 10,950 BCE. If that's true, then the monument is not just architectural, it's astronomical. A stone calendar calibrated not to the seasons, but to a specific cosmic alignment. And here's the twist. That date coincides with a younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a proposed comet strike that may have triggered a mini ice age and widespread extinctions. Is Göbekli Tepe a monument of remembrance? A warning? A reconstruction after something fell? No satisfactory explanation has emerged. No Sumerian tablets explain it. No oral myth from Mesopotamia even hints at it. But some Anatolian myths, long ignored, speak of sky fire and a people before clay. They say the gods emerged from pillars of stone, speaking not in words, but in vibration. You pause beside one of those pillars now. Your fingers trace the smooth chisel lines. No metal tools, no wheels, no texts. And yet, they built this. Something's off. A dry voice in your mind, maybe yours, maybe someone else's, says, "History remembers the victors." But prehistory? Prehistory forgets on purpose. You drift south through the dawn haze, past basalt ridges, and into a land that doesn't get headlines. The Black Desert of eastern Jordan. They call it Hara, volcanic wasteland. Not exactly hospitable, not exactly deserted either. From above, the rocks seem chaotic, but satellite imagery tells a different story. Circles, spirals, wheels, some over 70 meters wide, thousands of them. They're dubbed wheels of the gods, or less dramatically, desert kites. But what they are, why they're here, remains unclear. The official explanation? Hunting traps for gazelle. A hypothesis supported by little more than hope and the occasional shallow trench. And yet these wheels don't match the behavior of simple hunting structures. Their placement isn't strategic. Their symmetry isn't practical. Their scale suggests ceremony, not utility. You stand beside one now. The stones are weathered, but aligned with eerie consistency. The spiral draws you in, not metaphorically, physically. You feel your boots adjust direction without your consent. It's almost magnetic. Some researchers believe the wheels served ritual or astronomical functions, maybe both. Their orientation sometimes track the solstice or equinox. Other times, they align with nothing known, perhaps forgotten star maps from a culture erased. But here's the twist. These wheels are older than the pyramids, possibly older than Göbekli Tepe. No one knows who made them. No bones, no tools, no inscriptions, just layout. And yet, tribal folklore in this region speaks of a time before men planted or married, a time when fire wrote symbols into rock and the dead walked the wheel paths at dusk. A pre-agrarian society, perhaps, or something even stranger. Cognitive maps left in stone, before writing, before agriculture, before the deluge of linear history. And there's the real fracture. Because these wheels exist in a temporal blind spot, too advanced for prehistory, too early for civilization. Archaeologists politely file them away as anomalies, outliers. But there are too many of them, too consistent, too deliberate. One theory, rarely spoken outside fringe forums, posits that these stone wheels are part of a global symbolic system, echoes of a pre-cataclysmic network. Similar petroglyph spirals have been found in Peru, in Australia, in New Mexico. Not identical, but close enough to raise eyebrows. Some suggest a shared symbolic lexicon passed through oral transmission across a world that had not yet named itself. Others argue this is simply human pattern-making, pareidolia in stone. The same kind of thinking that sees faces in clouds and gods in thunder. Still, no satisfactory explanation has emerged. No definitive dating, no cultural context. And the deeper you look, the stranger it becomes. Because beneath these wheels, sometimes within the spirals themselves, are stone piles, cairns, not burial mounds, not quite, but something contained, carefully arranged, as if holding something down or in. You crouch beside one and feel the stone's temperature. Warm, though the morning is cold. It's not poetic. It's a measurable anomaly, geological or something else. You hear a dry voice again, maybe yours. This is not absence of evidence. It's evidence of intentional erasure. And in the distance, the wind shifts, sounding just for a moment, like a chorus in a language no longer spoken. You head west into what should be emptiness, the Sahara. From above, it looks like nothing, just dunes upon dunes, folding like sleeping giants. But below the sand, something stirs. You're in southern Algeria now, the Tassili Niger Plateau, At first glance, it's just eroded sandstone. Until you step closer. There, on the rock face, faint but deliberate, are figures. Thousands of them, etched, painted, overlapping across the millennia. Men with bows, women with horned helmets, beasts with impossible proportions. And something stranger, floating entities, bulbous-headed, bulbous-eyed. Figures the French ethnographer Henri Lot dubbed Les Martiens. Anthropologically, these are labeled as Neolithic cave art, dated to around 8000 BCE. That alone should be enough to rattle the standard narrative. But the style, the themes, they feel out of place, non-aligned. This isn't primitive pastoral art. This is symbolic communication. This is myth rendered in mineral, and not just here. Across the Central Sahara, new LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar surveys are detecting subsurface anomalies, structures, chambers, straight lines that resist the natural topography. They're buried, some over 10 meters below, under sand that should not cover cities. A 2023 expedition out of Fezzan province registered magnetic irregularities that formed geometric clusters, squares, triangles, and one oval ring almost a mile across. No material has been recovered, just patterns. No satisfactory explanation has emerged, wrote the report, before being quietly retracted 2 months later. You walk the dunes, which now feel less like nature and more like concealment. A deliberate veil. Then there's the Eye of the Sahara, the Rishat structure in Mauritania. At first believed to be a natural geological formation, later thought to be an eroded dome. But some fringe theorists, cautiously, almost apologetically, suggest it resembles Plato's description of Atlantis. 3 concentric rings, surrounded by mountains, positioned oddly far inland, yet eerily consistent in proportion. Of course, Atlantis is mythology, allegory, academic suicide, if taken literally. But is it? Because oral histories across North Africa speak of cities swallowed by sand and floods from the stars. Tuareg tribes tell of Kel Esuf, shadow beings who carved stone with no tools and vanished with the wind. They are not honored. They are feared. And if you step far enough into these tales, you start noticing something. The timelines break, the logic frays, yet the symbols remain consistent. Horns, spirals, triangles, the same motifs from Göbekli Tepe, from the Black Desert, from nowhere and everywhere. Material culture without continuity, architecture without ancestry, symbols without a written language to explain them. You kneel in the sand beside a petroglyph, barely visible in the noon glare, a spiral inside a triangle. Your fingertips brush the stone. It's smoother than it should be, almost vitrified. Historians still debate whether these structures are natural formations or the degraded remains of unknown settlements. That's the official line. But tonight, in this silence, you suspect otherwise. You suspect that what we call the beginning is simply where the survivors chose to start over. The desert falls behind. You drift east into the Zagros foothills of Iran, dry, wind-scoured, and seemingly timeless. But tucked between the hills lies a site most textbooks either ignore or conveniently forget. Jiroft. To the casual observer, it's just another Bronze Age ruin. But Jiroft isn't just old, it's anomalous, and that makes people nervous. In 2001, flash floods revealed something strange. Elaborately carved chlorite vessels buried deep beneath modern farmland. Stylized eagles, stepped motifs, winged humans, not in Sumerian, not Elamite. A style that feels self-contained, not derivative. Excavations followed, then controversy, then silence. Because Jiroft isn't just an archaeological site, it's a data rupture. A city with its own writing system, one independent of Sumer, not proto-cuneiform, not borrowed glyphs, but its own set of symbols carved in vertical rows, suggesting an early form of syntax. And yet, the dating puts it as early as 2700 BCE, possibly earlier, depending on which stratigraphic layer you trust. One problem: that timeline makes it contemporary with early Sumer, or older. You stand on the cracked tiles of what was once a plaza. The ground is hot underfoot, though the air is dry. You pick up a shard, a fragment of what may have been a ceremonial bowl. It's inscribed. The characters make no sense. They aren't pictographic. They aren't decorative. They're something else. The site has yielded over 25,000 objects, but only a fraction has been cataloged. Many of the most revealing were looted and sold on black markets, dispersed across private collections in London, New York, Geneva. Some are rumored to reside in locked vaults beneath universities that officially deny their relevance. No consensus has been reached about the language of Jiroft, say the official reports. Further interdisciplinary analysis is needed, which, in academic speak, means we don't know what to do with this. Some researchers believe Jiroft is simply an extension of Elamite culture. Others suggest it predates Elam entirely. And a few, quietly, without publishing, have begun comparing Jiroft symbols to the Vinca signs of southeastern Europe. What would that mean? A cross-regional symbolic system predating both Sumer and Egypt, or perhaps something older that seeded them all. But that's fringe territory, the kind of territory where careers go to die. Still, the myths persist. Locals speak of Arata, a fabled kingdom mentioned in Sumerian texts, a land rich in lapis lazuli, gold, and strange knowledge. A place where the gods lived before they moved west. Some believe Jiroft was Arata. You walk deeper into the ruins. The walls are low but deliberate. Carved stones lie where they fell, not from erosion, but violence. As if something or someone ended this civilization suddenly. You feel it again. That discomfort, that recognition. The sense that this place is both new and ancient, known and erased. Another spiral carved into the floor, another triangle within it, a symbol that seems to follow you now. You remember what one scholar said in an interview that never aired. The danger isn't that Jiroft rewrites history. The danger is that it restores a version we buried, and the wind rises again. Only this time, it doesn't whisper. It warns. From the Zagros, you drift. This time not over land, but across the curve of forgotten oceans. West Africa falls away. The Mediterranean gleams. And then, snow. You wouldn't expect to find anything here. You're standing at the base of a glacier, not in Greenland, not in Iceland, but Antarctica, beneath a sky that feels too quiet. Of course, the textbooks will tell you. Antarctica is a frozen wasteland, geologically stable and only recently explored. Human civilization had no part in its history. But you're not here for textbooks. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis compiled a map. Not strange in itself. What is strange is what he drew. A coastline that appears to match, within striking accuracy, the ice-free outline of Antarctica. Not the current glacial boundary, but the subglacial landmass, which wouldn't be fully mapped by sonar until the 20th century. How? The map included notations, some written in Ottoman Turkish, others transcribed from older Greek sources. One phrase stands out, drawn from ancient maps no longer extant. Piri Reis did not claim authorship. He claimed inheritance. Some researchers dismiss the accuracy as coincidence. Others point to Orontius Phaneus, another Renaissance mapmaker who depicted an ice-free Antarctic interior, complete with rivers, mountain chains, and settlements. A strange obsession for people living 300 years before Antarctic exploration. Mainstream geographers explain these anomalies as misinterpretations of South America or stylized map-making conventions. But that explanation withers under scrutiny. Because in 2024, a multidisciplinary core drilling expedition in Princess Elizabeth Land uncovered fossilized pollen from trees that haven't grown on that continent for at least 2.5 million years. And nearby, something more troubling. What one internal report described as a geological anomaly resembling artificial substructures. Buried deep, non-aligned, too regular to be natural. The data was promptly classified. The report pulled offline within 48 hours. Some believe these are just ice deformations. Others, perhaps less cautious, whisper of pre-glacial civilizations, cultures that existed before the crust shifted and ice consumed the memory of Earth. You crouch near a crack in the glacial wall. The ice hums, a low vibration, inaudible to the ear, but not the bones. Inside, under meters of frozen silence, something gleams. A symbol. You scrape frost away. It's faint, almost a suggestion. A triangle, a wave, a circle within. It matches carvings seen in Algeria, in Turkey, in Jiroft. It should not be here. Some researchers believe, others dismiss. That's the line you've come to expect. But one glaciologist, speaking under condition of anonymity, said, "We found something too aligned, too square. Not geology, but we weren't allowed to dig." It would be ridiculous, unthinkable, to believe civilization could have existed here. And yet, what if it didn't exist here? What if it ended here? A final station, a refuge before erasure, a vault beneath the ice. You look up. There are no birds, no trees, just endless white and something humming beneath your feet. And that dry voice, yours again, murmurs, "We didn't forget. We were made to." From the coldest edge of Earth, you now climb, not physically, but conceptually, into the highlands of South America, the Andes, thin air, thinner history. You find yourself staring at Tiwanaku, near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia. It's not a ruin, it's a contradiction. Mainstream archaeology dates Tiwanaku to around 500 CE, a late bloomer in historical terms. But something's wrong. The stonework doesn't match the timeline. Massive basalt blocks, some over 100 tons, rest with near laser precision. Joints so tight, not even a razor blade can slip between them. No mortar, no errors, just purpose. How did a pre-Incan society, without the wheel, without draft animals, move and carve such megaliths? Most guides blame it on cultural sophistication, which is a polite way of saying, we have no idea, but they were clever probably. But look closer. The Akapana pyramid, now mostly rubble, was once a 7-tiered ziggurat, laced with water channels that reflected the night sky, possibly a functioning hydraulic observatory. And at the gate of the sun, you find something older still. Astronomical engravings, solar alignments, figures holding staves surrounded by glyphs no one has ever deciphered. Some call them gods. Others think they're symbolic artifacts, tied to a lost calendar system. One researcher compared the glyphs to those found in Jiroft. Another was dismissed from his department for suggesting a connection. No scholarly consensus exists, reads the footnote. But legends in the region speak of Viracocha, a bearded, pale-skinned teacher who came before the Incas. He arrived after the flood, taught agriculture, then disappeared into the sea. Of course, the bearded white god trope has been overused to justify colonial narratives. But what if the story wasn't about race, just timing? What if Viracocha wasn't a man, but a memory, a flicker of something older, retold through a local lens? Oral transmission of an event so distant, it no longer makes sense, but still echoes. You walk to Pumapunku, a nearby complex. There, the stones shift the argument. Because these aren't just big blocks, they're machined, or at least appear to be. Perfect 90-degree cuts, bored holes, symmetry without tools. Geologists call it a puzzle. Skeptics call it erosion. But engineers, they say it's not possible with copper chisels. One dry paper notes isotopic inconsistencies in mineral fusion, as if the stone had been heat-treated, then reassembled, not shaped, melted, then molded. You run your fingers along a groove too perfect to be natural. It doesn't feel like it was carved, it feels like it was designed. And there, tucked into the side of a half-buried wall, the triangle, the wave, the circle within, the symbol again. You've seen it in Turkey, in Iran, beneath the ice. Now here, in stone that predates the empire that allegedly made it. One archaeologist once wrote, before redacting himself, Tiwanaku may not be the origin point, it may be a reconstruction site. You sit down, the wind thins, your breath shortens, and somewhere between sky and stone you realize, history isn't wrong, it's incomplete. The Andes don't hide a beginning, they mourn an ending. And what came before? Left blueprints. You descend now, below sea level, below the surface of recorded memory, into what was once land, but now lies under the ocean. You're standing on the deck of a submersible, somewhere off the coast of Indonesia, not far from Bali, not far from the edge of myth. Below you, Sundaland. Most people have never heard the name. Fewer still know that during the last ice age, Sundaland was a massive subcontinent, a landmass larger than modern India, connecting Malaysia, Borneo, Java, Sumatra, and parts of Thailand. And it wasn't empty. Today's seabed was once fertile floodplains, river valleys, coastlines where cultures thrived. Before the waters came, you lower into the deep. Visibility blurs. And then, slowly, the shape reveals itself. Steps, walls, terraces, gunung padang. On land, it's just a hill, a jumbled pile of volcanic rock. But beneath that outer skin lies something stranger. Ground-penetrating radar reveals layered construction dating back to 22,000 BCE. That's 17,000 years older than Sumer, older than Göbekli Tepe, older than what history dares to admit. The Indonesian government briefly published these findings in 2018, then went quiet. Excavations were halted, funding cut. Officially, the data remains inconclusive. Unofficially, core samples show aligned basalt pillars buried under meters of earth, placed with mathematical precision. Evidence of non-aligned architecture far too advanced for the era. You walk the upper tier. The ground seems to pulse, not physically, but perceptually, as though the structure is aware of your presence, or remembering it. Local myth calls this the Mountain of Light, a place where sky beings descended and taught pre-speech people to build in stone. The site is said to hum after sunset, especially during solstices. But no instruments record this sound, only those who listen. Fringe theorists suggest Sundaland may be the root of all flood myths. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. A once thriving civilization drowned by the Younger Dryas sea level rise, its survivors dispersing east and west, seeding what we now call the cradle of civilization. Mainstream historians dismiss this. Migration patterns do not support it. Correlation is not causation. No material culture survives intact. But then again, it's hard to find pottery when it's under 400 feet of seawater. And then, as your submersible tilts slightly, the camera catches something. A carving. Not large, just sharp. Impossible geometry preserved in stone. You zoom in. There it is again. The triangle, the wave, the inner eye. On a wall no human has touched in 12,000 years. You whisper the question, half sarcastic, half horrified. Did civilization start under the sea? And something, maybe your mind, maybe the water, answers, no. It ended there, because this isn't where we began, it's where we tried to begin again. A last attempt, a blueprint sealed in stone beneath the rising tide. From submerged ruins to river valleys, you now resurface, far from the equator, into the ancient forests of southeastern Europe. Serbia, where the mist never fully lifts from the riverbanks, and history wears more than one mask. You arrive in Vinča, a small village near Belgrade. Nothing grand, just soil and silence. But beneath your feet lies one of the most enduring archaeological enigmas of old Europe. The Vinča culture. Dated between 5,500 to 4,500 BCE, officially Neolithic. But something doesn't match. You enter a museum, a small one, barely staffed. Inside, in glass cases barely lit, are tablets. Clay, baked, etched, not decoration, not random scratches. But repetition, structure, lines, crosses, chevrons, spirals. Symbols arranged in rows and columns. Too orderly to be dismissed. Some call them the Vinča symbols. Others go further. Pre-writing. Because these marks appear long before Sumerian cuneiform, and they're not isolated. Identical signs have been found across the Balkans, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece. Over 700 unique characters, but no known Rosetta Stone to translate them. Mainstream archaeologists call them proto-script, possibly ritualistic, possibly meaningless. But here's the problem. Some of these symbols match the glyphs found in Jiroft. Thousands of kilometers away, thousands of years apart. Coincidence? Perhaps. But as one Hungarian scholar once noted in an unpublished paper, coincidence ceases to be explanation when the pattern repeats. You leave the museum and head toward the original excavation site. The soil is damp, dark with silt. You kneel, find a shard, and there, barely visible, are the grooves of a glyph, a triangle, a spiral, a small dot at the center. It's here too. Material culture that spans geography. Symbolism that predates alphabet. A system that appears and vanishes, again and again. And still, no consensus. Some researchers suggest the Vinča signs are not linguistic, but cosmological, calendrical, markers for ritual timekeeping. Others argue they are purely artistic, but they keep showing up on pottery, on altars, on what can only be called books of clay. And always the same motifs. Not just spirals and crosses, but tools, compasses, stars, things no Neolithic farmer should have reason to draw. Local legends speak of bogini, star women who taught humans to bind stone to voice. They left when the water rose, promising to return when the symbols could be read again. It's a myth, of course, but the alignment remains. You run your fingers along the tablet. It hums, not in sound, in memory. Because this isn't just a script, it's an echo, a language not yet understood, because we are reading it backward, And from behind you, the wind rustles the trees like paper turning in the dark. From the forests of Serbia, you move east toward a civilization that has always whispered from behind veils of mist and empire. China, but not the dynasties you know, not the terracotta army, not Confucius. You're heading further back, to the Longshan and Liangzhu cultures, two Neolithic settlements whose sophistication seems out of joint with their accepted dates. You arrive at Yuhang, near Hangzhou. The air smells of wet stone and old rain. Modern buildings rise behind you, but the dig site ahead feels older than memory. Liangzhu. They call it that the first Chinese civilization. Only, it doesn't quite fit the mold. Discovered in the 1930s, dismissed for decades, then reluctantly embraced by academia in the 2000s, Liangzhu is now dated to around 3,300 to 2,300 BCE. But something doesn't add up. The jade artifacts found here, bai discs, Kong tubes, precisely carved, and always in symbolic configurations. The jade is hard, harder than iron. Yet these Neolithic artisans worked it into shapes that defy hand tools. They had no metal, no wheels, and yet perfection. And those shapes? Rectangles encasing circles, spirals, triangles, eye motifs nested inside geometric forms, symbolic artifacts, almost architectural in meaning. You kneel beside a half-exposed Kong, its edges still sharp after 4,000 years. A dot, a wave, a triangle. You sigh. It's here too. Some Chinese scholars privately suggest these symbols predate language, not in age, but in function, not to record speech, to initiate memory. And then there are the hydraulic systems, sophisticated dams, canals, and water control structures, constructed on a city-wide scale by a so-called pre-dynastic people. Modern hydrologists confirmed the Liangzhu engineers understood water pressure, flow mechanics, even geo-surveying. And yet, the culture vanished. Not slowly, suddenly. The sediment layers tell the story. Flood, but not a seasonal one, an event. Was it a dam failure? Was it rainfall? Was it, like other collapses, intentional? Some researchers suggest the society imploded from within. Others think the flood was used as cover. Because after Liangzhu vanished, China entered what some call a silent millennium. A gap. Little architecture, little writing. Just oral traditions of sky fire, gods descending from the clouds, and the stone eyes that could no longer see. The Liangzhu left no written records, but they left patterns. On walls, on bone, on jade. Patterns now appearing across time zones and tectonic plates. You walk the edge of the dig site. The ground feels soft, but something beneath is harder, maybe stone, maybe intention. You whisper, mostly to yourself. Some researchers believe Liangzhu inherited from something earlier, then add bitterly, but they always say that, when they don't want to say what. Behind you, a cicada calls. Or maybe it's not, because the air is suddenly too still, too focused. You place your hand on the earth and feel the pulse again. Low, reverent, a memory locked in jade, waiting for us to relearn the language we were made to forget. From jade terraces to sunken shores, you now cross into a place that no longer has a name because its land is gone. Not by myth, by water. You're somewhere between Britain and mainland Europe, floating above a memory hidden beneath the North Sea. Doggerland. It once connected England to the continent, a sprawling plain of forests, lakes, and rivers, home to animals, plants, and people. It existed during the Mesolithic, around 10,000 to 6,000 BCE. But rising sea levels, fueled by melting ice age glaciers, slowly consumed it. Then came a final blow. the Storegga Slide, a massive undersea landslide that triggered a tsunami powerful enough to erase coastal life. Officially, Doggerland is seen as a lost ecosystem, a prehistoric Eden swallowed by the sea. But the artifacts tell a stranger story. You're aboard a trawler. Sonar pulses below. Divers retrieve flint tools, carved antler picks, worked wood. Then a surprise, a structure, or what remains of one. Timbers arranged in a circular pattern, anchoring stones, a hearth still ringed with blackened soil. Who built this? Doggerland was supposed to house nomadic hunter-gatherers. But you don't build foundations for a life you plan to leave. On shore, in eastern England, researchers found a carved oaken totem dating back 8,000 years. It had a face, elongated, serene, surrounded by spirals. DNA analysis on recovered bones suggests these people weren't a cultural backwater. They were genetically diverse, connected, possibly trading across distances no boats should have crossed, but they left no writing, only patterns and oral legends, faint but persistent. British folklore speaks of the sunken hundred, of bells ringing beneath the waves, of land that once stretched far into the sea. Dutch fishermen tell of the drowned city, where their nets sometimes catch bricks or bones. No scholarly consensus exists about the scope of Doggerland's human activity. Its boundaries keep shifting, like the memory of a dream fading with light. But some researchers suggest Doggerland may have been more than a refuge. It may have been a convergence point, a place where peoples and their symbols met before dispersing. The theory is dismissed as premature. Still, beneath the sea, the evidence is accumulating. Sonar scans in 2023 revealed what one geophysicist described as rectilinear shadows inconsistent with natural formations. She was asked to revise the report. She declined, then retired. You lower into the water. Visibility is poor. Silt swirls like ash in a forgotten fire. Then your lamp catches something, not stone, wood, blackened, preserved, etched with a spiral pattern. Familiar. You reach for it. And for a moment, the sea stills. You feel it, like static in the skin, like being remembered by something that shouldn't know your name. Doggerland isn't myth. It's evidence. Of a world not lost, but interrupted. Of a story whose first chapter is still underwater. And you hear a voice, dry, amused, detached. We didn't evolve from tribes. We survived from ruins. From drowned forests to scorched soil, you now land in a place few discuss and fewer still study in depth. Because what it holds is not just early, it's too early. Mehrgarh, Pakistan, a seemingly unassuming Neolithic site tucked near the Kachi Plain. Most textbooks mention it briefly. One of the earliest known farming settlements in South Asia, dating to around 7000 BCE. Grain silos, pottery shards, bone tools, an expected tidy progression. Except it isn't. You walk the perimeter of the exposed dig. The air here tastes dry, like heat layered with ash, not from a fire, from a memory of fire. Excavators found something unusual in Mehrgarh's stratigraphy, a burn layer, thick, widespread, not caused by hearths or human activity, but by something hotter, faster. Some suggest it was a wildfire. Others propose an earthquake that ruptured storage pits. But isotope analysis of the affected soil revealed traces of vitrification. Earth partially melted, as if flash heated beyond natural combustion levels. This is not normal. Not for 9,000 years ago. One fringe group proposed an ancient weapon. Another pointed to celestial impact, a meteor that exploded in the upper atmosphere, like the Tunguska event in 1908. That theory was quietly removed from academic papers. But the signs remain. The soil shouldn't behave like this. The pottery in the burn layer is fused. The bones are missing, not decomposed, gone. The absence is louder than the presence. Worse still, beneath this layer lie non-domestic structures. Rooms with smooth plaster floors, aligned corners, drainage systems. No one agrees what they were for. Storage, ritual, shelter. Some even suggest that Mehrgar's early phase may not have been an origin, but a resettlement, a culture returning after something else ended. That's when you find the artifact, a small token, stone but not local, blackened by heat, inscribed with a spiral, a triangle, a single circle at the center again. No one's officially logged this symbol here, but a few scattered notes from a private excavation in 2010 reference shared motif clusters with Anatolia and the Caucasus. That report too was unpublished. It now circulates as a PDF in Fringe Archaeology forums. Its title, Remnants of a Pre-Sumerian Signal. You crouch by a trench. The earth is cracked, like a memory trying to forget itself. And the deeper you go, the stranger it gets. Because core samples pulled from beneath the settlement suggest a pre-human layer of ash, laid down some 12,800 years ago. The same date associated with a younger Dryas event. The same timeline that shadows Göbekli Tepe, Gunung Padang, and now Mehrgar. Scholars argue whether it was global catastrophe or climate shift. They argue because the data is uncomfortably consistent. Too many sites, too much heat, too little explanation. And the myths? They speak of the ash sky when the gods fled underground, and the fire song ended the world. You feel the sun on your neck, hot, too hot for evening. But you're not afraid, because fear is for the living. What you feel is different. It's recognition. Mehrgar isn't a beginning, it's a scar. Proof that before we built up, we were already trying again. From Asia's ancient plains, you cross the oceans again, not toward ruins this time, but toward emptiness. North America, a continent rich in indigenous heritage, myth, and tradition, but oddly, archaeologically quiet when it comes to first civilization status. The textbooks say humans arrived here via the Bering Land Bridge some 13,000 years ago. They speak of the Clovis culture, named after the distinctive stone tools found across the U.S. Southwest and Mexico. They say Clovis marks the beginning. And then, very suddenly, Clovis disappears. You're standing in New Mexico, near the banks of the Blackwater Draw, the site where Clovis was first discovered. It's dry, wind-stripped terrain, the kind that whistles without warning. A place that feels like it remembers something it's not supposed to. You crouch and pick up a flake of chert. Sharp, purposeful, thousands of years old. Clovis tools are technological marvels, fluted spear points designed for large game hunting, consistent, precise. Then, around 12,800 years ago, just as suddenly as they appear, they vanish. What happened? Some point to the younger Dryas event again, a sudden return to glacial conditions, possibly caused by a comet impact, meltwater pulse, climate crash, extinction of megafauna, end of a way of life. But others suggest the story is incomplete, because long before European contact, Native American oral traditions spoke of giants, sky people, and ancient builders who vanished before memory. In the Midwest, Serpent Mound coils across the Ohio landscape with astronomical precision, aligned to solstices and lunar nodes. Officially built around 1000 CE, but the platform it sits on may date back 5,000 years or more. In Michigan, early European settlers found ancient copper mines, far older than local tribes remembered using. Tens of thousands of tons of copper had been removed, with no clear evidence of smelting or usage. Just absence. Who mined it? Where did it go? Some theories propose a pre-Columbian transatlantic contact. Others suggest internal cultural memory gaps, histories disrupted by catastrophe, drought, or time. But beneath the speculation lies something harder to dismiss. Artifacts with no context, petroglyphs with spiral language, burial mounds that, when excavated, yield not only human remains, but tools with non-local isotopic signatures. In 1996, at Kennewick, Washington, a skeleton was discovered, 9,000 years old, with cranial features unlike any known Native American lineage. It sparked a legal and ethical battle over identity, repatriation, and what constitutes evidence. Today, the site is closed, the bones reburied. No further investigation is warranted, they said. But you know better, because this isn't absence, it's erasure. You stand at the edge of the Mississippi, watching the current swallow the sky. Then you see it, on a half-submerged stone just beyond the shore. Not writing, not art, just a groove, a triangle, a wave, a dot. It's here too. Unclaimed, unexplained, and wholly out of place. You remember what an elder once said in a recorded oral history, long removed from public archives. We did not build the first world. We buried it. And as you stare out across the river, it no longer looks like water. It looks like time, still flowing over the ruins we forgot to remember. You're nearly at the end now, or perhaps the beginning. Because where you go next, there are no maps, just ice, and beneath it, something that doesn't match. You return to Antarctica, but not to the coastline. You descend, this time, into the Transantarctic Mountains, a place so remote that even satellite imaging yields more questions than answers. In 2025, a joint research mission conducted deep ice radar surveys here. What they found wasn't geology, it was geometry. Perfect hexagonal voids, right angles beneath 4,000 feet of glacial compression, echo patterns that implied man-made chambers or cavities too symmetrical to be natural. The official report used cautious phrasing, subglacial anomalies inconsistent with known glaciotectonic processes. Unofficially, the team wasn't allowed to drill. You arrive during a rare weather window. The sun spins horizontally above the horizon, throwing long shadows that feel like fingers reaching across time. A makeshift station has been abandoned here, hastily, judging by the journals still left on a cot. You flip one open. Dates, coordinates, drawings. One sketch stands out. A carving, reportedly imaged through synthetic aperture radar. A spiral inside a triangle, encased in a circle, accompanied by what might be star maps, or a language made of alignment. It matches what you saw in Gunung Padang, in Mergar, in Tiwanaku, in Vinča, in the desert wheels. It's the symbol again. The journal ends mid-sentence, a single line. This isn't natural. It's waiting. You step outside. The air is too still for a continent of wind. You walk to the edge of a newly exposed crevasse. It plunges into blackness. Not a crack, but a shaft. The rope hangs like a question no one dares to finish. And then, a vibration. Not seismic, not mechanical. Harmonic, the ice sings. Some researchers call it cryoseismic activity. Others suspect it's something else, a resonance triggered by alignment. Sunday, ice, earth, memory. The indigenous Maori tell of Pautini, a guardian spirit of greenstone who watches the edge of the world. The Inuit speak of Kilak, the sky's breath, holding secrets beneath the white. None of these stories are about Antarctica, and yet all of them feel like they remember it. What if the ice doesn't just cover? What if it preserves? One fringe theory, never published, suggests Antarctica was once at a temperate latitude prior to a rapid crustal displacement. Pole shift, continental drift on fast forward. Absurd? Yes. And yet, fossilized ferns have been found beneath the ice. So have pollen spores from species only found in temperate forests. And one granite column, photographed in 1979, disappeared before it could be recovered. It bore the spiral. Back then, no one noticed. Now, you can't unsee it, because this isn't a new discovery. It's a pattern, a frequency, a language too big for ears, too old for ink, too precise for coincidence. You kneel beside the crevasse, lean in, and hear it. What you call ancient was never past. It was only buried. You exhale, not because you're afraid, but because, finally, you know. Sumer was never the beginning. It was merely the first time we dared to speak, after everything else was forgotten. You return, finally, to where the story was supposed to begin, Sumer. But now, it looks different. The ziggurats still stand, weathered, half-collapsed, but no longer monumental. They feel like echoes, not origins, replicas, not revelations. You wander through the ruins of Uruk, but your mind drifts far from cuneiform. It loops backward, to triangles carved into desert stones, to submerged staircases, to burnt soil, to frozen hymns beneath the ice. You now understand. This isn't about chronology, it's about continuity. You sit near the base of a broken wall where weeds creep through cracks that weren't supposed to last this long. And there, almost missed, barely deeper than a fingernail, lies a carving. Faint, out of alignment with a known script, but clear in shape. The spiral, the triangle, the inner circle. You've seen it across 6 continents, in 7 languages, etched into ruins with no shared history. It's not a symbol, it's a signal, not for worship, not for record, for remembrance. Because the story we tell, the one that begins in Sumer, is not wrong, it's just incomplete. Sumer was a restart, not a birth. A reassembly of a system broken by flood, fire, and silence. And every myth, Atlantis, Zep-Tepi, Arata, Lemuria, isn't a fantasy. It's a wound memory. A scar told in the only way a civilization in recovery knows how. Metaphor, repetition, ritual. You think of the spiral again. It's not just decoration, it's a path. Inward, then back out. Collapse, then rebirth. You rise and walk, slow now. Not because of fatigue, but reverence. The land feels different. You notice alignments where you once saw chaos. The temples face solstice, the stones match stars. The myths mirror maps. Everything repeats. And yet, no one remembers why. You stop at the edge of the site, where tourists gather in small clusters, listening to guides speak of the dawn of civilization. You don't interrupt, you listen, and realize they're telling a bedtime story to the modern world. Simple, clean, comforting. But you've wandered into the footnotes, into what survives outside the story. Because not every fall leads to ruin. Not every silence is absence. And not every beginning starts at the beginning. Sometimes civilization is like a whisper, repeating, waiting, building just enough to survive the next forgetting. And here, at the edge of it all, you finally understand. The question isn't, what if civilization didn't begin in Sumer? The question is, what if it ended there and started again beneath the dust? The wind stills, The shadows stretch long. The camera pans upward. Your breath fogs against the heat. Your hands are covered in the oldest dust on Earth. And far above, the stars blink in a pattern no one reads anymore. But somewhere, beneath desert, forest, sea, and ice, the memory remains, waiting.